But it is time, and we're going to go ahead and get started because my task is to teach you about sales and go-to-market in an effective way that is tangible, that leaves you with something to take and apply directly, especially if you're sitting in those shoes directly, or if you're supporting founders, then you can hopefully pass on some best practices to help them go further. And we have a very short amount of time to cover a lot of ground. If only I could just be like, sales, ta-da, go. That would be awesome. But we can't. So let's get into some actual stuff so I can make today really worthwhile for you. And first, I'll start logically by introducing myself. I'm Janette Renshaw, partner at GrowthX, where I'll give you a little bit of background about what perspective I'm speaking from so you know where my expertise comes from. Today, I'm pseudo-calling this a product market fit workshop because I have a love-hate relationship with this phrase. It is very well used and sort of understood, but also not very tangibly understood. So I wanted to get just some group feedback here to kick us off. Who would like to take a stab at identifying what product market fit is or defining it? Yeah.
Product market fit would say, is there an existing market for it, and how does that product fit into that?
Give me one more time. I know it was good. Keep going.
Sorry.
You're good.
I teach, and so usually I can talk loud enough everybody hears. I would say that it is, have I truly identified the market that the product fits in, and rather, you always start with the market and then you develop the product based on market needs. So I see that as the fit. How do you have that fit, or is there a market for it, then produce the product? And I actually was at a startup, I ran a startup where we did not have, I came in too late to do the initial design, but we ended up creating a product that there was no market for.
Yeah.
And it failed.
Harsh reality. There's a lady right behind you that would like the mic if you'd be so kind.
Is it a current need?
Current need?
In the space?
Absolutely. Other contributors to our, yeah? Got some hands over here. Thank you. I'm going to keep you on your toes, but not for long. A confident, quiet nod.
I think you also need to be flexible because sometimes the market changes very quickly. So you cannot make a product for a long time. Just now things changes and also the competition changes.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get maybe one or two more little perspectives and then we're going to keep it rolling. I know we could go for a while.
It's a product that solves a real problem for a specific group of people, and they're happy to pay for it.
Yeah. Maybe one more. Someone from this side of the room. We got hands over here. I know we've been neglecting you. Not forever.
I'm a job student practitioner, so I'll take that lens. It's the ability to understand the circumstance in which your customer is hiring your product and truly able to nail it down.
Yes, I love the detail. So I would agree with all of what's been said. And what's really nice about, what's not nice about typical product market fit definitions is they're sort of like tweetable wisdom, like you'll know it if you have it, and if you're not sure, you probably don't have it kind of vibes. And it's like, that's nice. Not super helpful if I'm in the weeds trying to seek product market fit and evaluate against myself if I have it or I'm close to it or what I would need to do to get there. So one of my goals today is to help demystify this and put some criteria around it. So just setting the table a bit for where we're going to go, and then I'm going to really hone in on what the most important building block towards product market fit and ultimately repeatable, predictable sales is. But first, let me do what I promised and back up a bit. And I'm just pointing at, I'm very easy to find, and I'm going to invite you all to connect with me later, both just to stay friends and also if you want continued help, I'm offering it openly. So when it comes to why startups fail, this failure rate makes me so pissed. And I couldn't be more sincere. And it's because I get to work with founders every day, and almost all of the founders I work with are not building something for no one. They're building something that is seeking to make the world better, to change the world, to improve the lives of someone out there doing a job or something of that nature, or even just a consumer life in some instances. Now, I work with the B2B founders, and that includes business to government, B2B2C, multi-sided marketplaces. I will layer in some aspects of B2C today, but most of my perspective is going to be B2B oriented, just to set that table as well. So I'm from GrowthX, and the reason GrowthX was founded is because we all hated this number. And one of the things we noticed when we were looking at it very critically is when you look at the reasons why there's such a high rate of startup failure, it's often cited as no market need. Well, if you're interviewing a founder who's had a startup that hasn't succeeded, they're probably not going to be like, couldn't figure out sales. And so it gets a little bit massaged into what is no market need, but it's not building something for no one. It's usually trying to figure out sales, and then runway ends before the figuring out happens, which is terribly sad and preventable. When we look at academia, we don't have a sales pillar in most academia today, secondary education especially. There are some universities doing it, it's exciting times, changing, but most people don't. Every other major pillar of business has an academic backbone, so at least we have like the book smarts, the frameworks, the context of what's stage relevant for different types of businesses and different stages of maturity. In startup world and in sales, they're just like, figure it out. Everyone before you has been successful has had to. You only have to figure out literally everything else in your business that you're not a subject matter expert in to do this too. Isn't that great? Super helpful. No wonder. So beyond just needing to figure out sales, and there is guidance out there, like there are frameworks. This isn't a black box as it's presented. This is my passion. So just a little bit of like bringing us up to speed today. You know, when we look back 30 years ago, making technology was wildly more expensive. So raising funds, building tech, having the know-how to build tech, namely being like a software engineer in a lot of our applications today, that was already a burden to be an entrepreneur. But things have really changed since then. And in the age of applied technology, we've got no-code, low-code platforms, lots of jumping off points, entire infrastructures we can build on top of. Making tech is no longer the burden it used to be, or the expense it used to be. So when we're competing for venture capital or market share, we really differentiate ourselves and our viability of our business because of how we sell. It's never been more important, arguably always very important, just not given the love it deserves and the enablement founders really need to do it well. So passion is around helping founders demystify sales and understand what they need to be doing tangibly in the weeds to achieve them day over day from customer 1 to customer 50 and beyond, and all the hard steps in between. I work a lot with early stage sales, no secret. So, and when I say early stage, because that can mean a lot of things, and I don't like buzzwords that aren't defined, I'm usually meaning commercialization to Series A, give or take. It's not a hard line, but that's just a ballpark of what I mean when I say that. So at GrowthX, we were born in the Valley as venture capitalists, as experts in go-to-market. We started realizing, as we deployed this go-to-market methodology for our portfolio of companies, we can be helpful to a much broader scope of founders and entrepreneurs. And we opened it up and let it out so it's not just the portfolio and it's not just our companies and our investments. And now we run programs all over the world helping demystify sales. And our mantra is first we help, then we invest. And we also go further than that, as our thesis is sort of narrow and we can help lots and lots of founders. We work with lots of venture groups all over the world. They get insights through the diligence we run in our program, and that helps them de-risk early stage investments, which is the reason they're on the sidelines predominantly if they're in that range but hesitant to jump in early stage or earlier. This is what we're here for. And we work now no longer in the Valley, but serving rising startup ecosystems. We're not opposed to serving people in really, populated places and thriving ecosystems, but there's so much talent, in America and the middle and in all the nascent ecosystems worldwide. And that's where we're passionate about bringing these resources. So that's a bit about what my background is and what I'm speaking from. And in the last 4 years alone, I've had the pleasure of working with some 500 founders on this journey, which is just magic and has given me the insights I get to share with you today. Back to our product market fit that we did at the beginning. What we heard when we kind of crowd polled was a lot of elements that were great and are parts of product market fit. If I'm going to pick at any of them and say, all right, we've got need, we've got customers, we have similar customers or use cases or things of that nature. Well, how many? When do I know it's enough? How do I know I have it or I don't? And there's a lot of really awesome material out there about product market fit also being something you achieve in stages through growth and maturity, which I absolutely subscribe to. But in this case, we're talking about just initial product market fit. And what it isn't, to be clear, is a specific dollar amount or really even a specific number of customers. Because you can acquire customers very haphazardly. And we hustle our way to doing that when left with our black box of sales and B2B. So instead, and the GrowthX definition is not like, we're right, this is the truth, get in line. It is truly just tangible things to grip onto to help guide you on your journey. So let's do 5 tenets of product market fit. The first of which is arguably the most important, but they're all important, which is a narrowly defined customer and use case. Heard that a lot from our crowd poll. I can't put enough font edits on narrowly. bold, italicized, underlined, highlighted. Give it all the narrow. It is more narrow than most anyone thinks when we get to start working together. I mean, lots of companies who say, I understand my ideal customer, and then we get into it and they're like, I did not, and the way that you want me to. And that's okay, like that's what we're here for, but I will push you to get crazy narrow. And it's not because I want your market opportunity to get narrow, it's because I want you to have a chance to capitalize on that giant TAM, that total opportunity. And to do that, we need to take one step and then two steps and slowly work our way into revenues and resources and infrastructure and the things that it takes to grow a large company, which starts with those first initial steps in the very niche market entry. That also is going to be down with your MVP. When you go to build a company in your mind's eye, it's more of a finished, beautiful product. And then you get to MVP level and you're like, I have to sell this. This is going to be harder than I thought. It's not done yet, but I need revenue. There's a logic to how you go about that. And we'll talk about that today too. So narrow, narrow, narrow. Customers and what they're doing with it. And then stickiness. So sometimes we see folks selling to familiar network, friends, people they used to work with. There's nothing wrong with this, as long as they're also the right customer and use case for what you're trying to find as far as fit with your solution. If they're not, they're doing you a favor, that's very nice, but they're probably going to churn with time as they're not using it well and the like. And so stickiness is about, if I take it away from you after you've had it long enough to feel the value of it, are you pissed? I want you to be really upset. If this solution that I'm selling you has value and is making a difference in your day-to-day life and you're feeling the impact of it, then if I'm just like, yoink, it should be upsetting because now you're sliding backwards. If they're not upset, if they're like, that was kind of cool, on to the next thing, but we have a problem. And then beyond that, we need to know why they're pissed. If we don't, they're like, that was good, they loved it. How do I articulate that to the next person like them? If I don't really understand the nuance of how it fits, what the value is, what it means for their day-to-day life, the impact on a personal and professional level in a B2B setting. So it's important to understand the true, full value the customer is receiving, why them versus anyone sort of like them but not exactly like them, and what it means for them day to day. And then we need to be able to do that repetitively. So right away, just throwing a wrench in it. I see companies, and I've met companies where they think they're ready to raise a certain round because they've got enough customers. They have a certain number in revenue dollars. Investors told them, I need that much revenue, and then they'll invest. That's just not the 2025 world we're living in. They're going to maybe be impressed if you hustled your ass off to a bunch of revenue, but that's not what they want to throw money at because they can't replicate you and your hustle. What they can do is say, okay, we need to organize this. It's promising how much you've been able to hustle to, but this is not investable. As an investor, when you can say, by way of achieving a sale, I can light this fire. I can go camping and I can build a fire and I can light it. That's great. I can go camping and light a fire every time I go. I'm good at fires. And then you go, Mr. and Ms. Investor, how about some gasoline for this fire I know I can light? When I add resources to my team, the fire will continue to be lit because I can teach them how to light the fire because I know what it takes in a repeatable, systemic way to the same types of people and the same types of use cases over and over again. And then my last tenet for product market fit is a little less hear me out when I describe it. This is a common ratio in SaaS metrics and go-to-market metrics, CAC to customer acquisition cost to lifetime value. But what it's not saying is get it tightened up right away. In fact, the inverse. I don't care about how white glove you have to make your first customer's discovery and acquisition. I have yet to meet a founder who, when they figure out doing it right the hard way and they codify what works systemically and repeatably, that they can't find measures of efficiency with all of the tools and technology and resources we have today. Not a one founder I've met that goes, I've just crushed this manually time and time again, and I can't think of a single tool I'd use to make it more efficient. However, what I do meet every day is founders that are saying, I've built this whole system with Clay, tech stack this, tech stack that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, great, does it work? Oh, we're having trouble with response rates. It's yeah, we haven't even proven what works yet. Why are we building measures of scale? And so what I mean to say here is don't worry about this yet. As long as we're not paying for the leads in a way that is always tit for tat and unscalable entirely forever, figure out what works. No investor is going to be your first 10, you were very hands-on. Problems for me. No. They're going to see what can be gleaned from that and systematized. So again, this is not the end-all be-all definition, but it's more specific in a way that helps you start to understand not a specific number of customers, not a specific revenue number, but what do I need to do and what do I need to understand about those customers in the acquisition process to have true fit. And when we say quantity, stage relevant is a really important factor in sales. So a lot of times I'll say significant enough repeatability. And in really, really early stage companies, sometimes that's 5 to 12 reps. You know, if you're at customer 2, 5 to 12 reps is a lot. If you're at customer 10, even then 5 to 12 reps is a lot. So if you're getting consistent feedback loops from the exact right people, whether you're interviewing, selling, learning for, or revenue for learning or revenue for profits, as I like to say, it's all good. So moving forward, I really want to hone in on this first bullet point because it's so easy to say and so hard to do well. Narrow. Narrow, narrow, narrow. When I do ideal customer profile activities, and spoiler alert, I will leave you with the link for a template today that you're welcome to take and use. It will not wow your socks off. It's an Excel sheet for age. It's going to give you a framework to jump off from. I meet tons of founders who have lots of really strong ideas about the attributes and the factors of fit, maybe demographics of their ICP and the like. ICP, ideal customer profile, just making sure we're all speaking the same language. But they don't have them organized together. A really true ICP is going to be multiple factors of fit layered in a cohesive hypothesis that you're going out and testing. And you'll certainly have multiple of them, and many of them will have shared factors because you're plugging and playing and figuring out what combination of these attributes truly signal interest and need for right now, where my product solution is right now, where my sales and abilities are right now, and all of those in-betweens. So when we think about what makes this hard and what makes it so importantly like done well when it's done well and how it's utilized is that we're not treating every one of our potential customers in a given segment as equal. Now, I'm not saying that in like a discriminatory way, but if we're looking at, let's say I work in a certain industry and then I have a certain pocket of customers, I'm saying companies of about this size, and they're in this space, and they're in my state because I'm selling in my backyard first. That's where I want to start, Janette. I'm like, great, but we know they're not all equal. So what makes them different? So I was working with a company in Canada, and they're selling an innovative solution for employee contributions towards a 401k plan by allowing the employees who receive those benefits to divert a portion, as much as they want, of the employee or the employer's contribution to the 401k to student loans or mortgages. This is very innovative and cool. They could sell to employers of certain size with certain attributes. They don't want to go straight to enterprise. There's something brand new. They don't want to go teeny tiny. They need to have bang for the buck. They've defined a healthy middle. Let's stop treating them all as the same. Who's on a best place to work list? Who already has above and beyond benefits? Who's showing us signals that they already adopt these things? And we can see that from afar. And what we're doing is we're refining the kind of criteria that heightens our ability to have a likelihood of fit when we earn a conversation with them. In sales, earning a conversation with the right person is the hardest part often. Once you are a founder with a solid solution and you get a conversation with the exact right person you want to be speaking with, things tend to get easier. It doesn't mean there's not plenty of opportunity for refinement in sales management. It's just the hardest part is usually earning interest. So let's put our efforts in the exact bucket where when we connect with someone, it's the highest likelihood of finding a fit with what we're doing today in our solution and their needs. We're not treating everyone as equal. In any subsegment of an industry, there are best in class and not as best in class. An easy signal to see is like you don't get to be best in class by sitting idle or just doing kind of the normal stuff. You're intentionally acting and spending to be best in class and to stay there when you achieve that status. Already we know you're forward thinking in some way. Most people, founders, when I talk about early adopter traits, like what signals make them different, they go, or they'll fill out an application for my program and be like, they have an innovative mindset and they are a young tech adopter. And I'm like, wow, impressive. Okay, how are we going to see that? So until they start putting like name tags on their forehead or badges on their LinkedIn, it's going to be very hard to know who carries this mindset. But we can see signals from a business. If I have a chief people officer, I probably have dope benefits. I've got entire staff just for my people. Maybe I should be looking there and looking at other ways that I can identify who's the right fit for me. I'm talking a lot about the company level even though we ultimately sell to a human inside a business, because we have to get narrow enough in our scope of what type of company to understand which human at that business is the right person for me to talk to. If I just said, I'm selling into fintech, that's a giant industry in a very broad stroke. Is it, like banking institutions? Are we in Startupville? Where are we at? What size and scope? What is their typical hierarchy? How are their responsibilities delineated? Who would be evaluating this type of solution as an economic buyer, or maybe more at the user level, or overseeing the users and would have more understanding of the application day to day? Is that the same person or are those different people? We need those answers, but you will drive yourself insane trying to answer it without first going, where's my scope? Because the same company type at very different levels of even just size has different hierarchy and different decision delineation, and that matters. So get narrow on the company before you get into the people, but don't neglect getting into the people. When I get the pleasure of working with founders, I'm always saying, like, we need to be in the keystrokes. If I'm a knowledge worker and I sit down at my computer in the morning, what tabs do I open? When do I meet with my boss? What do we talk about? How do I become a hero at my job? What am I responsible for? What am I with KPIs and the like? We even get into language, like you need to speak their language. Super pro tip, if you're going in an industry that isn't native to you or is somewhat native but you don't speak their language, get into their podcasts. Learn how they talk. What are the understood acronyms? What are the things they're saying all the time? You demonstrate credibility through the things you say and the questions you ask, in addition to overt credibility like, I have this many customers, we have this many years of experience. They're all good, but they compound. And when we can do it subtly by talking the talk, we get a lot of cachet right away when we're trying to earn a conversation, especially when it's not a face-to-face discussion, but also then. And then don't underestimate this. When it comes to ICP work, it's hard. And it might not feel hard, and I would argue it's because most of us are stopping short. When I work with founders and we get to the most narrow ICP, I say, all right, let's assume we could just hit a button and print out all of the companies that match the criteria that you've defined here on this page. How many are we talking? Tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And the goal, which is a benchmark, is 2-digit number. Scary small. And again, we're not stopping there. We're just being especially precise because we have so much time in the day, and so much free time, and we need our sales efforts to pay us back. So we need to be spear fishing, not net casting, and we need to be fishing in those pools that have the kind of people we think we're going to have the highest likelihood of fit, so that when we are in those convos, we get it right. And so that means narrow, narrow, narrow in all the ways. And that takes a lot of time to figure out. And it takes conversational validation. So you can design it and document it and research it, and then you got to hit the streets and talk to the real people. When we design it in a vacuum or we use all of our AI tools to do market research for us and our interns, we still need to prove it with conversational validation. There are things that are true, but they're just not important to people. Like the other day I was working with a founder and they were like, yeah, the nurse said they need to be up on compliance to this level and the charts. And I was like, all right, what happens if they're not compliant? Because she wasn't compliant in that afternoon. She was, trying to get back to her compliance level. And they looked into it. It was like, kind of just like a best practice. No real penalties in this field. It's not heavily regulated. Like, yes, it's a regulation, but it's not like they're checking or they feel the burn of like when it falls down. So they're not thinking about it like that. Like they're trying to do it to the best of their ability, but no one's breathing down their neck and nothing bad is happening. Like it's just not that important. And those are things that come out in real life combos. So I mentioned this a minute ago, but when we're selling at this stage in the game, you shouldn't think about it as selling. And I encourage everyone as a founder to, in your prospect conversations, say like, I'm not a salesperson, I'm a founder, and I'm passionate about what I'm working on and improving, this for people like you in the world. I'm here to see if this is helpful. I'm seeking fit. Because what you're not going to do is say, this makes no sense, watch me double down on sales. Like, I have way too little time to try to force a square peg in a round hole and manage a giant pipeline of maybes and stuff. No, I'm here to be helpful. I want someone collaborative. I'm too early in this journey. I need people who are going to already have an understanding of the problem. So we're not here to sell. We're here to seek fit. And with any measure of success, you grow into the need to sell. Congratulations, it gets harder. As someone who's done all kinds of sales in my life, it only gets harder. At a public company, you have a specific amount of people you're allowed to sell to in a certain region, and you have to earn your whole quota just from them, like it or not. We have the whole world, And our TAM is also like world domination usually. So let's figure out where we want to start to have that initial success, to earn the right to make sales harder and to grow into serving more audiences and larger swaths of people and the like. Another thing I want to dispel is that we've got a lot of folks in the founder world that I meet that are like, my pipeline, Janette? Pfft, everyone, gigantic. I've got leads coming out the ears, millions and millions in my pipeline. And I'm like, great. How do you manage? What's the throughput? There's a fallacy that having a bunch of leads in your pipeline means you're setting yourself up for more sales, and that's just frankly not true inherently. Also, how much time do you have to give to revenue any given week? If you haven't done a calendar audit, figure it out. It's less than you want, I promise you. And then I'd recommend you check yourself and say, do my revenue behaviors match my revenue beliefs? i.e., if getting money is important to my company and longevity, how much time and effort am I putting toward it? And a lot of what I find when I challenge my founders with that is not that they don't want to put more time toward it, it's that when they do, they don't see any return from their efforts. It's hard, they're floundering, they're trying, but they don't know if they're doing it right. So they shell back into what they're used to, whether it's operations or fundraising or product or any of those things. Okay, it's hard to do things and see no return for your efforts, but we also have to know what to do, right? And that's where we help. And what we don't need to do is fill a giant top of funnel of maybes, because we don't have time to manage them all. What we want is a strong bottom of funnel of highly qualified people, or even just a narrow funnel of highly qualified people, even if they're early in the conversation. That's going to help us spend our time with the right people, prospect to find more of the right people to bring into the pipeline when they're in my ICP profile, and not treat everyone equally. Again, not in the way that sounds discriminatory, in the way that is prioritizing your time and your business and fit. So I mentioned this also a few times. If we think about taking your TAM, your total addressable market, the largest of concentric things on your deck, and we break it down, we can break it into 3 buckets. Mr. Ms. Right, Mr. Ms. Wrong, Mr. Ms. Right now. Now it's easy to spot the wrongs. They use a solution by our direct competitor, they're owned by the PE firm that owns our competitor, they'll never buy our stuff. Like, that's totally reasonable. There are plenty of no's. It's the rights that get us distracted. These are the folks that are going to be customers, but probably not for the stage of our solution today. Maybe they're an enterprise that's going to want to see a lot more proof of efficacy with our customer base, with our traction. Maybe they want more features, and our product needs to be more developed to be ready for them and their specific needs, or integrations, or security compliance, and the like. What we're really honing in on is exactly where the fit is today. To the tenets of product market fit we talked about earlier, who looks at our MVP and says, you're beautiful, just as you are, this is game changing, I need it now, I want this. If you can make that easier for me, I'm here for it. If it gets better, I love that too. I'll be here when that happens, but it matters today. And I'd be pissed if you took it away today. That's right now kind of fit, and that's a different level of criteria. And you can think of it, tech adoption curve and the like. But one of the ways I like to think about it is, imagine that you're trying to do this activity, right? You're trying to hone in on who is the most narrow right now, everything. And outside your front door, literally or proverbially, there's just a bunch of your whole TAM is there. They've all come to your lawn. They're waving orders in the air. Janette, I'd like to buy now. This is obviously a fiction. But you couldn't sell them all. You would drown and die immediately. That would be a terrible death. So who do you bring to the front of the line and why? It's tempting to be like, all of the enterprise home names, it's like, no, but they'll be upset. They'll expect more out of you. They'll keep you distracted. Who is the best fit right now and why? So it's the same activity as the ideal customer profile, just done in the inverse to get you thinking a little differently about it. And when you think about, messing up the line, it's certainly problematic if we bring in a little too small companies where you're working your ass off to sell them and then you get a drop in the bucket of revenue. Or the too big companies that keep you wildly distracted, or they, just demand more than you're ready to serve. When you hit the sweet spot, it's still problematic if you have too non-homogeneous of a customer base that you grow. We want our customers to be very similar. It's frequently underestimated in founder world when we have different customer audiences, what it takes to sell them and support them. We think well, I kind of do the same thing, whether you're this person or that type of company or this type of company. It's like, sure you do. But selling them, supporting them, talking their language, the different languages, the different sales processes, the different buying roles, that's all different. And that gets really busy. It's a context switching in your brain. It's the different processes. When you're trying to codify a repeatable process, it's going to throw a loop in all that, or like a wrench in that loop, rather. So we want to make sure we have a homogenous customer base. And we also just know, like I've mentioned spearfishing over netcasting several times. I just want to call out my last thought here very specifically. This is not Field of Dreams. If we build it, they will not just show up. The frontline idea is a fun but hypothetical thought experiment. We cannot wait for them, and we cannot blog or case study or LinkedIn post our way into driving consistent inbound from the right people who are our ICP who we're ready to serve. We might get some randos, and some of them might be really great, and some of them might be interested, and some of them might be mostly just distracting to what our core purpose is here. So we need to go find them and say, I think you're perfect. Can we talk? I'd love for you to tell me if I'm barking up the wrong tree. Here's my hypothesis. Here's why I thought you were sending me a signal that you care about this already, and that I'm here to help forward that initiative that you already stated aloud. So another way that I like to say the same concept is who shares your worldview? And what I mean by that is we are not out here to educate people into our problem that we solve. How many times have you been told or learned maybe in real time that you have a problem that you hadn't really identified as a problem before and you didn't really think of it like that, but when it was positioned to you differently, you're like, oh, I could see that. And then the next thing you do is like, how do I buy a solution right now? Get my wallet out. I joke, no one does that. You don't move to action when you've just pinpointed a problem, especially when you're acting on behalf of a company where your decisions have to be justified with a P&L, and you need to have a reason to take budget, and you need to have proof of like return and how it's impacting the whole organization. So I don't have time to educate you because you're not my Mr. or Ms. right now. Later, with any measure of success, you get that burden, and it's a whole new phase of growth, and it's a fun, interesting challenge. Most founders I work with are trying to do a lot of that because they look at other startups and companies and they're like, oh, everyone has a blog. They got white papers, they got case studies. Oh, I'm in this field and therefore I need credibility in this way or that. It's not that you don't. It's just that you don't have the time to educate them today. And so let's go back to that example from earlier where I said that they have the 401k contributions from the employer that they can reallocate to either student loans or mortgages. That's selling an innovation because no one knows it exists already because it's new. So you don't go looking for someone who already has a budget for it. That doesn't make any sense. You can't find people that already want that exact thing. They don't know to want it. But you can look at those signals we were talking about as early adopter traits. They have some of the top-rated benefits packages that go into the nuance of all the nitty-gritty of what makes them unique and special. They're offering things that are far beyond standard. They're doing things out of the box. Maybe they've purchased certain benefits and they have them provided to their employees outside of their core benefits provider, which is what this startup was challenged with doing initially. That's a signal that says you already get the problem. You already know that to be a top-rated employer, you have to be at the front of the herd and to stay there. You weren't looking for what I do, but it aligns with your worldview, and that's why I think you'd be interested in this. Tell me if I'm off track. I'm here to learn, and I'm seeking fit. But if you're feeling what I'm feeling, let's get into brass tacks. Like, let's talk about it. So, there is the tech adoption curve, and I am saying early adopter traits. And what I mean is these signals from the field. Are you hiring? Are you a best-in-class provider? Are you putting out in your annual report or 10K that you have a clear objective around this? Is there something else that's signaling to me? Maybe you have an infraction in a regulatory perspective. Maybe your competitor just launched a new solution and you have to maintain market share and you're all spinning up ways to do that. There are so many things that can be triggers at a contact level, the human at that company, or at a company level. And if you're lacking ideas for triggers, there's lots of great resources out there for what triggers could be, and then you use your lens of stage relevance and bring it back into your specific circumstance and start to unpack what might my early adopter traits be for any one of my given ICP hypotheses. Because I've worked with lots of founders that do a good job getting more narrow on their ICP hypotheses with demographics. It's the early adopter traits that make all the difference. Stop treating everyone in a demographic bucket as equal and figure out what signals they're sending you that say they care about the problem you solve in advance so that we don't have to take the time educating them. So I often say, we're trying to take the most direct path to revenue for the least amount of effort, which is why I will often advise founders I work with that are very early stage not to do a lot of those typical marketing things. I am not at all anti-marketing. I do lots of marketing for my own company at GrowthX. I work with lots of larger companies that do marketing things, and I'm happy for them, and I like them, and I think it makes sense. It's about stage relevance. You have this much time, you need to go the most direct path, because most marketing things, said loosely, are indirect paths. I'm going to put feelers out there. I'm going to do awareness. I'm going to have collateral. I'm going to have some credibility over here. It's like, that's nice, but it takes time and effort to do it well. You have to maintain it over time as you learn things. You're learning things every day. And so it's a lot of upkeep and maintenance to have a good brand impression. And guess how many deals you're closing out of it? Mostly zero. Maybe a couple outliers, but mostly zero. And that's where we want to focus on what's really the most direct path. A lot of the factors I've been talking about today for ICP are around the companies we're courting and the people at those companies. But we also need to be selfish about our factors of fit. We only have so much runway, so if we're pursuing a sales process that far outpaces our runway, we got a problem. Sound the alarm, like does not compute, doesn't work. We also have to figure out what acquisition methods are we going to try. If we only meet them at conferences, which I'd argue, but let's just say, do we have money for that? Because if we don't, we have to take those factors into account as well. Sometimes I'll work with founders who they've shortlisted their ICP hypotheses. So out of their entire potential right now, they've got 3 really, really narrow, tight hypotheses that are all sort of competing equally. And they're running interviews and they're trying to distinguish who's who. And it's getting really tight. And what I like to remind them is this is not one answer. It's not like there's only one. But you need to focus on one so you can come correct and approach them in the way that you'd want to be sold. Speak their language. Know their work. Don't show up and say, what keeps you up at night? Because their eyes will roll to the back of their head and they will hate you. If instead you're like, hey, when I talk to the users of the world, they're always telling me that their employees are spending too much time on this. They find it to be a manual task, but they can't get around it. And they would love to have the time back to put back in the pipeline or get them back on task with other important thing they're doing that I already know because I know their life. I can journal a day in it, and I can speak that language. Then the person I approach with that kind of rhetoric is going to say, how you know that? Let's talk about how you do what you do, because that's a bold claim. So when you have a tight couple of hypotheses, sometimes a differentiator is, where is my network? If I spent 30 years in one of these lanes of theory, and I have a ton of network connections there that can help me do interviews and help me get feedback and facilitate introductions for potential prospects, or at least interviews that can then become other introductions, and you just keep pulling that thread of who else is a forward-thinking name of title that I should be talking to like you. Now we get something cooking. So sometimes when we have a tie of short list of right now ICPs, we use the selfish factors, runway, connections, familiarity with language and the like, to pick where we lean in first. And then the market always tells us if we're on the right track or not. Again, stage relevant validation can be as low as 5 to 12 interviews of the exact same people, give or take, giving you the same type of feedback loop, basically confirming your hypothesis about my need for this and the impact it would have on my business and stuff is right. And so those are important. And one of the things we like to say at GrowthX is we don't bring feelings to a data fight, because it's fun to say. And also it just helps us get out of anecdotal things that can be really distracting and compelling in startup life. So one more thing before I wrap, and then I'll be happy to take questions and I'll hang out after, is just a reminder, again, 45 minutes is wild short for everything I'd like to share with you as far as B2B knowledge today. But we didn't get to messaging, which is a huge section and is so fun to talk about. And the core principle I want to impart with you all is it is not about what you do, and the sad reality is no one cares yet. Because it's not their job to care about you interrupting them to say, hey, do you want to talk about my stuff? But instead, if you say, hey, I could help you save this much money that you're currently spending on this, reduce your compliance issues and the infractions that total this much year over year stated publicly in this way, help you keep your specific metric up above this barrier so that you get government funding that you need desperately to run your operations, whatever it is very specifically for them. When you say, that's what I do, that's how I help, they're going to go, how do you do that? What I can't do is say, hi, I'm Janette, I'm here with GrowthX. We run a 16-week accelerator. We do all this. No one cares about what I do. But if I say, my passion is demystifying sales for B2B founders, if that's a problem you're feeling, you're going to go, okay, how? Great, now we have a two-way conversation going. So all of your messaging should be leaning in with what you do for them, not what your technology is, not that it's a platform, not that it's AI, ML, blockchain, the Web3, like no, not yet. Keep it in your back pocket. Let them ask. And then we're gonna come correct, sell the way we wanna be sold. And from the Navy SEALs, we borrowed slow is smooth and smooth is fast, because the real burden here of doing this well is it's hard and slow at the beginning. But you can choose hard and slow at the beginning or hard and slow forever. So in that light, hard and slow at the beginning pays you back. And I'll often say scale is the byproduct of a repeatable process that works, not something you build inherent. Build something that works, do it repeatably, you will find measures of scale. Not, I'm building a scalable infrastructure right now with my tech or something because I haven't even figured out if it works yet. So here is the ICP starter kit, that lovely Excel template I promised. It will come downloadable with an enablement video. If the QR code is tricky or you're just not with your phone, you can always Google GrowthX space ICP and it will be one of the very top non-sponsored results. And then if you're curious about my program, I threw a QR code up there, but it's not why I'm here today. What I'd love to do is spend the rest of the time taking questions about what makes this really hard. I can talk about best practices with this teeny tiny amount of time we have to cover a gigantic topic in your world, but I want to make it applicable. So what about this is hard, or what questions do you have for me? And thank you for your time and attention. Yeah, we have one over here. Thanks, guys. And thank you for everyone standing and sitting on the floor. My heart is full with your attendance, and I appreciate your endurance.
Thanks for such a great talk. I was wondering about finding the people who like your MVP right now, and if they're like necessarily going to be compatible with your longer term strategy.
So when you're thinking about right now fit, and is it compatible with where you're headed long term, like right later fit? Usually when you're planning out an initial ICP market entry, if it's like, that's my right later fit, I could take this step, or I could take this step, or this step, or this step to be like a next tiny step into the market. But I'm going to be thinking about that as I'm drafting maybe these 4 steps around me, and I'm going to make sure I'm taking the one that also positions me there. The risk is more when you're staying in line with that, you'll build features that these people might not need or be able to afford, because initially you didn't have them and also you weren't charging them for them, and so they were perfect because your core feature works, or your core value hits for them. But you're going to grow into selling larger contracts with more robust features and stuff. So it doesn't happen inherently. There can be people that say, well, I can sell over here right now, which is just short-sighted, and I would not encourage that. If you're thinking, I might dabble over here for a bit just to get some revenue in before I go tackle that world over there, like it's going to end poorly. It's management of it all. But it's a great question. Yeah, we got a mic coming your way, and then I saw a hand over here too.
Hello, this is Marjan, and thank you for the great talk. So my question is falls under medical devices industry, so I hope it's applicable to some people here.
Yeah.
When I designed my own MVP and procedure, for sure I went through the product market fit and many interviews with nurses and healthcare providers, and I designed it based on what they bother, not they say they need or whatever. So going through all the rigors. But the issue is when I want to sell, I need to sell to the C-suite of the hospitals.
Yeah.
And I need to have all the FDA approved and all of that, which is make it harder. I have progress, but it's honestly like 20 or some hospitals max. Mm-hmm. And growing out such a network, it's, for me, maybe it's lack of my knowledge here, it's become tedious. And as you mentioned, I see that I put so much efforts, but I don't know even where it's going on. So my question for you with this background context is that for the startups that they are like early stage and they have already checked the product market fit.
Yep.
But the selling procedure and authorities are different. Mm-hmm. How we can bridge this gap to push it forward. And thank you again.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you for your question. I might sort of like appropriately, politely challenge like product market fit before we get to commercialization, because we're going to need to see it come to life, even if you know the use case very intimately from market research and like direct interviews, which is wonderful. So I think with med device, which I have a soft spot in my heart for because I have a background in that a little bit, you certainly have to go through clearance and get ready to commercialize. But then when it's time, the transferable principle for everyone is we have a different economic buyer than we do a core user. And we've been honing in on our core use cases as we've been building our product. But the real short answer of it is we speak differently to these different personas. And so when we're doing our ICP activity, if you're using the sheet I shared, you'll see it starts with economic buyer because we have to know them. But the way that I would speak to an economic buyer versus a nurse or someone who oversees the nurses and their tools and utilities, completely different. And you're going to want to go through the drafting exercise of what are the values, what are the metrics, how do I get a day in their life for every involved party, especially economic buyer, and what I like to call the evaluator, often called the champion. It's not necessarily on your team, but they're going to be the one assessing fit and use because they're more ground level of the usage, where the economic buyer might be removed, and every circumstance is different. That might be the same person in other settings, right? But for you, it's about learning two lingos and speaking to them differently and treating them differently. The economic buyer doesn't care about detailed use if the evaluator gives the approval, whereas they need to understand what's the business case here, where the evaluator is I don't do as much with the P&L. I don't need to know exactly the unit economics, but I need to understand what it's going to mean for my nurses, what their training is like, how they, all of those types of things. So I think it's just really about knowing both perspectives. Yes, go ahead.
So earlier you said, there was a line, it said, having your ICP as your single most important asset in go-to-market, which is a bold claim, but I actually totally agree. I work with a lot of business owners and founders as well, and I have, in the last 8 months, been trying to make every single one of them go through an ICP process. My question is, do you have data or research that you leverage when you make that type of claim that maybe you could share a link to or something like that? Because a lot of them will just be like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to niche down, I'm supposed to do this, and I'll do it eventually, but I don't want to limit myself. So I'm looking for quantifiable data that can back up that claim.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm going to share what I share, which I find to be powerful, although not necessarily quantifiable. One, we're not limiting ourselves to tackle the secondary part of that first. Just because I'm going spearfishing here doesn't mean I don't have my front door open. So if someone waltzes in my front door and says, I want to buy from you, I'm going to first evaluate, are you a wild distraction? Or are you close enough to my ICP that I'm going to get the money, I'm an early stage company, I need the revenue, and I'm going to be able to support you without it being crazy. In which case I say, come on in, the water's fine. I didn't go looking for you. I just eliminated most of my CAC. I'm not limiting. I'm also not stuck in my ICP forever. I just need a lane to penetrate to have the right to grow. So I take that off the table right away by saying, if people waltz in, if you get warm intros, as long as they're not a wild distraction to you, you don't have to say no to them. We don't want that to be a wild number or crazy all over the place, but it's okay. I understand early stage and revenue is very serious. To the why ICP is the most important asset of go-to-market, which I stand firm on, I like to challenge back in an appropriate way when I'm working with founders and say, all right, let's talk messaging. What are we going to say? All right, let's do pricing. What's it going to be? What acquisition strategies are we going to use? Because the true answer should be that every single one of those things is different depending on the audience and for whom. And when you try to solve it for your TAM, it's impossible. And the only way you're going to come up with any kind of brevity of answer is to boil the ocean and speak very generically, which is watered down and trash and no one relates to it. So if you speak directly to someone into the day in their life, using their lingo, talking about their world, it's going to resonate much deeper. You're going to get a different reaction. If you say a generic statement that can serve your whole TAM, usually you're just talking about yourself, already a no, let alone them. But then pricing. Who am I pricing for? Who's the authority? Is there a bandwidth for which they buy? Is it for the whole company? Are we starting with the department? There's so many unanswered questions. It's really, the real question is, I say go-to-market should be sort of an order of operations. And if nothing else, it's ICP before everything else. Because everything else gets so much easier when you know for whom you're answering those pivotal questions. So there's probably empirical data out there, but that's how I talk with my founders. I saw a hand over here. Yes. Oh, nope, we're done. Okay, I'll hang out after. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll be around.